Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Safer Arizona Wire. I'm your host, David Stephen Wisniewski.
And I'm Tom Dean, attorney for Cannabis.
And I'm Alex Lane, the president of Cave Creek Cannabis, and I'm also a criminal defense lawyer downtown.
Awesome. Well, tonight we're talking about Prop 207, who it helps. A lot of times people are only thinking about adults over 21 and with possession of their concentrates or their flower or home cultivation, but it actually extends a bit further than that. And a few areas that I think aren't talked about enough. One of them is, I think, children who are in possession of marijuana. Those crimes are reduced from felonies.
Did you say children who are possessed by marijuana?
Possession of marijuana. I don't think possessed by marijuana.
Right.
And I'm not advocating for children to use cannabis unless they have a medical marijuana card and they absolutely need it. But if we're legalizing cannabis for adults, what sense does it make to keep felony prosecution for people under 21?
Yeah, I think that was a compromise that was made by the Smart and Safe campaign. I think the concern was that if the voters legalized, if the voters legalized minors to possess and use marijuana, that somehow that would encourage minor use of cannabis, and that would just give ammunition to the opposition, who would then obviously make a big deal out of the fact that kids are going to be running around, and you will be back to billboards with babies and cookies. You know, remember in 2016? I don't know if you guys remember.
I remember that they definitely had lots of babies on their billboards.
I think that the campaign was very cognizant of that approach during the Vote No campaign in 2016. Beating that drum about what about the children? This is going to somehow encourage minors to use. And I think that by adding that to actually defelonize or decriminalize for minors, the concern was that would simply lead to give ammunition to the opposition.
Well, the opposition is going to use that no matter what. Yeah. But this initiative does reduce felonies to misdemeanors for children who are in possession of marijuana. And I think that's a better situation than it is today. Like I said, I'm not advocating children go out and use marijuana, but I don't think it's a good idea that adults are allowed to use cannabis. But the only people that we're giving people felonies for a small possession of marijuana are kids. When at that point in their life, they're so vulnerable to having their futures destroyed by marijuana possession charge. I remember when I was a kid, they tried to get me with a felony for possession of marijuana when I was just 17 years old. I had to go through drug diversion, and that would have ruined my life, because I wouldn't have been able to get into the military if I ended up getting hit with that charge.
In most, in Arizona, a juvenile record is sealed when the individual turns 18. So for most minors, teenagers, if they have a problem with possession of marijuana, that's not going to be something that's basically expunged. It's sealed when that person turns 18. I think maybe the greater concern would be, what about people who are between 18 and 21? They're adults, but yet they're not quite 21. I think I'm more concerned about that because juveniles will be able to have that, if they do get convicted, have that sealed anyhow.
So, Alex, how is it right now with minors getting their medical marijuana card? Is that a thing? Can a minor get their medical marijuana card?
Yeah. I mean, if a minor has a qualifying condition, they can. But certainly we're against, and I'm against, anyone not authorized by the statute under 21 using marijuana after this date, unless they have a qualifying condition and do so through the AMA.
So do they need to have a caregiver if they're a minor with a qualifying condition to get the cannabis for them? Or can a minor just, I guess the minor would be under 18 or under 21 with the medical program?
Under 18.
So could a minor just walk in with their medical card and get cannabis from a dispensary right now, if they had a qualifying condition?
Or do they need to have their parent with them?
Do they need to have a parent with them?
We've never had a minor enter, so I believe they would have somebody else come in for them, somebody under the caregiver program.
Because isn't the parent designated basically as a caregiver to a minor under the Medical Marijuana Act? So it would be the parent coming in to obtain it for them.
Yeah, I think that's the more responsible way to go about it.
Yeah.
So there's other ways that Prop 207 helps people. Let's talk a little bit about expungement. Tom, how is this going to help people who are have criminal records right now for cannabis, and what kind of people is it going to help?
Well, so first of all, if anyone has had a conviction that conduct occurred prior to the effective date of Prop 207, and we were talking before we got started here, that effective date is not going to be November 3rd. The effective date is going to be a little bit later in December when the governor signs Prop 207, and then that officially enacts it as law. So anyone whose conduct occurs before that happens will be eligible to either, if they've been convicted already, have that conviction and all reference to that conviction eliminated, sealed, expunged from their record. If their case is still pending at that point, they can file and have it dismissed. That would include anyone who's currently on a deferred prosecution, or as some people here in Maricopa County have often referred to that as a task program. Those people will immediately be able to file and have their charges dismissed if they qualify for the expungement.
And so you said pending charges. Now, once this thing passes, there's going to be a period of time before the governor signs it, and it's not technically law yet. Right. How do you think the police are going to change the behavior, if at all, during that period of time?
Well, I mean, I would expect that they're going to not enforce against persons who would otherwise be in compliance in just a month or so. And that's because those persons would be eligible to file a motion to dismiss as soon as the governor signs it.
So there'd be like a ceasefire.
Yeah, it'd be like a ceasefire. It would be a waste of time. Now, can I imagine some officer wanting to be difficult and cause a problem for people, a particular individual that maybe he doesn't like or something like that for whatever reason? I could see that that's possible. I think it's going to be very few and far between, though, that we see any examples of that.
Interesting. So, Alex, what other demographics do you think that Prop 207 is going to end up helping?
Well, thanks, Dave. I think the three most important demographics, and then I've added a fourth to my thinking about it, is all the people who might otherwise be arrested after 2020. So if you look at like whoever was arrested for possession from 2016 till now, had the last initiative passed, that would not have happened for those individuals. So really anyone in the category of new arrests for the conduct that's allowed by Prop 207, they won't get arrested. The second group, and as Tom just spoke about, and you spoke about, Dave, is the people who would qualify for an expungement. That's the second big group for whom you've got, you still have to answer questions when you're getting a job, or talking to a prospective mother-in-law, or a variety of contexts, which is, an important conversation, I guess. But it's a variety of contexts that those people are still suffering a harm. And I think the third group of people that will benefit are the lots of Arizonans who do not have a card, either because they don't have a qualifying condition, they can't afford a card, they feel that there's still some residual stigma to having a card. So I think that all of those people, and I could personally say as a medical marijuana patient, it's enriched my life. I think so a lot of people will have access to it, and I really think that it's time for us to stop arresting grown-ups for making a reasonable choice that the grown-up wants to make. So I think that taking that off the table will be a major benefit. And then the next group that I want to add to this was an article that I saw yesterday. So it's from February 13th from Vice. So I'm really up to the minute in my news. But it says, study finds bees don't just love cannabis, it can also help save their dying populations.
Interesting.
It makes them feel sexy.
It does. It does. That's actually right here in the article. No, it says humans aren't the only one that seem to gravitate toward the marijuana plant. Turns out even bees, etc. New study by the researchers at Cornell University published in the journal and so on finds that bees are super attracted to the cannabis plants, and et cetera, and it goes through, and there was this study references another study. So and certainly when Cave Creek Cannabis had its own cultivation facility, it was an outdoor facility in Mojave County, and it's not perhaps ideal to have bees come land on your plants because of the risk of pollination or something like that, but they do. I've witnessed they all over the place. So to my thinking, given that humans, if the bees die, we die, and the bees populations are going down, even irrespective of any other opinion you might hold either for or against cannabis and adult use cannabis, seems to me the fact that the bees like it, that's a plug for it, because you will allow home cultivation under 207.
Save cannabis, save the bees, save humanity.
Now, I did hear the only problem is that they tend to eat a lot of the honey that they make when they're consuming cannabis. Is that?
I think that's probably true. And by the way, when the bees, it's called, I actually Googled this, it's called bearding. So when the bees all leave their hive, they do so for maybe a variety of reasons, but one of which is it maybe gets too hot, so they all kind of come out somewhere and then, beard on a plant, and they do beard on marijuana plants. So you will see literally thousands of bees. We actually have a picture of it up in Cave Creek Cannabis.
Oh, wow.
If I can track the picture down, I'll post it in the comments to this. But it is, they really do seem to love it. And I think that providing a little habitat for bees, because if somebody's got 6 plants in their backyard, obviously in compliance with the act, and that's done elsewhere, it provides a greater habitat for bees. Which every time we build a new development, we're taking down the natural habitat that they have. It's a way to help bees and help us all live.
Hi, I'm Tom Dean, attorney for cannabis. You may know me from my work here in Arizona in important cannabis-related matters like the ASU campus ban case or the cannabis concentrates case, State v. Jones. I've been representing cannabis consumers for 26 years now, and for the last several years, I've been doing nothing but that, representing people in important criminal and DUI cases related to the use of marijuana. If you've got a case involving criminal charges, or if you're just looking for advice or wanting to enter the Arizona's cannabis industry, please give me a call. You can reach me at 602-635-4990, 602-635-4990, or visit me on the web at attorneyforcannabis.com.
Amazing. So so the bees are losing their natural environment, but cannabis plants are a good alternative for them that can help sustain these populations, especially maybe in the city areas.
That's what Vice News says, and I've certainly noticed that in Mojave County. Plus, I talked to some bees on the way over, and they said that they promise that anybody who votes yes on 207, they will not sting you.
Well, that's good, because I'm scared of bees. I know they're important, but I don't like being around them.
Though, if you're around a bunch of them, if you just chill, because they're all over the place.
I don't know, man. I got a panic disorder. I'm going to start freaking out, and I'm going to get stung all over.
I mean, that's right. I mean, obviously, killer bees are a little more aggressive, but your average honeybee is very, I mean, you really have to taunt them a good deal for them to want to get into an aggressive mood. So,
yeah. And I have been stung by a bee. I was young, and I was watching this bee. You could see its shadow, and then suddenly the shadow disappeared right as it got on my head.
Wow.
So I tried to brush it off, and I had a big stinger in my finger.
How long ago was that?
That's probably a long time. I was a youngster.
I won't even tell my bee sting stories because it was my fault entirely every time it happened.
Yeah. By the way, if I just let him just fly away, I'm sure I would have been fine. But
Well, bees, what's the word I'm looking for?
An unintended benefit.
Unexpected journey.
An unintended benefit of Prop 207 is going to help some bees out. But I kind of want to go back to expungement real quick, because I had a question pop up. Now, there's people who are in jail for marijuana crimes, and a lot of times they had priors, either a marijuana prior or they had something else done like burglary, or they commit some sort of crime. How do you expect expunging their marijuana crime would affect people who are in jail or have priors or on probation with priors?
Yeah, people who are in jail or on probation, and there are people who are actually in prison in the Arizona Department of Corrections for simple possession of marijuana. Now, those are generally people who have a fair amount of some priors in their past. Most people on a first offense possession of marijuana would not end up in prison or jail for that matter. I think, though, that I'm definitely going to attempt to get those people off probation, out of jail, if they're in prison, out of prison, using this expungement, these provisions. Now, it doesn't appear that that was the intent of these provisions, but I think that it can be argued, and possibly successfully, for people who are currently serving sentences either on probation or in jail.
Unintended benefit.
Who we can get them out of that. Now that's I'm sure there'll be people that disagree with me on that, but I know that there are other people that agree that might be possible. including the director, I think, over at the Arizona Dispensary.
Yeah, I asked Sam Richards on his Q&A with AZ Canna Friends if it's possible that someone can be released from prison if they are in prison and they qualify for expungement. He said, yeah, it's absolutely a possibility, but I'm not going to speak to any individual case because they've all got their different variables.
And so it's something to hope for. I think it's possible, and we're certainly going to try. And that'll be, anyone. So anybody who, after this passes, happens to be on probation, for possession of marijuana or possession of concentrates.
Or deferred prosecution, as you mentioned.
Well, in a deferred prosecution, the case hasn't been, the person hasn't been convicted. The case is just on hold, so technically it's still pending. And the expungement provisions specifically say, if your case is pending, you can get it dismissed and expunged. So dismissed and expunged. If you've already been convicted and you're serving a sentence, technically your case isn't pending, but I think we can argue that. So if you're still serving your sentence, by all means, come in and talk to me. I'd be happy to try and see if we can get your probation or your jail, get you out of jail if you're in jail.
And Tom, one of the things you might speak to is, when the AMA was written, it doesn't take into account every possible thing that might happen. It's basically, saying that, look, we're going to authorize medical use and here are the rules. But so, for example, like probable cause, an officer smelling, detecting the odor of marijuana, the AMA does not address that. And that you can see those cases moving through the court. So sometimes the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court will be presented questions, like, for example, a situation in the expungement where maybe somebody has an old prior that's a felony, and then they commit some new offense that's not marijuana, but that prior is used to enhance the new charge that they have, which would give them, maybe that because they have, now they're a repeat offender, if you can knock out that earlier charge, what effect that will have. And I don't know that there's a ready answer, and it's certainly not, if the initiative were to try to catch all that stuff, it'd be 1,000 pages. So the court will decide what was the intent, and they'll make those decisions. And your name is on how many of the AMA cases?
Like Court of Appeals or Supreme Court. A lot of them, a lot of them. Either, oftentimes as amicus curiae attorney on behalf of Normal, typically is who I represent when we're filing amicus briefs. But a lot of them. I know you're in there too.
I think I'm on one, but no, you're on like
one
10.
Of the most important,
you're on 10, but no, I think that a lot of this stuff will have to get worked out in courtrooms as to what was the intent. What was the voter intent behind the initiative?
Because obviously, like even when we have the legislature with staffs drafting committees, marking stuff up, even what they pass is it can't answer any questions. So there's always going to be cases that have to interpret legislation, and that's coming out of the legislature, or Congress that has been poured over to get it as perfect as possible. This is an initiative that's written by the people. We don't have all of those resources that are available to like a state legislature or the United States Congress. So this is written as best as possible, but certainly it can't possibly answer every possible situation. So there's going to be, like anything, like any law, there's going to be litigation that's required to interpret it and to straighten out any ambiguities that we might have here, and there will be some. So
I don't recall, but doesn't it say somewhere in the initiative that the smell of marijuana is no longer probable cause for search?
Yep.
So how is that going to help people?
That's huge, because one of the problems we've been having under the Medical Marijuana Act is that that police can still go and get a search warrant based solely on the odor of marijuana. They're not required to first verify whether that person is a patient or a caregiver or authorized to cultivate. Just on that odor, they can get the warrant, bust in the door, and tear the thing down. That happens all the time. They're not going to be able to do that anymore under 207, as far as I can tell, in the way this is written. So they're going to have something more, some evidence that the person, let's say, for example,
your tongue is green.
Well, no, like so you're allowed to grow 6 plants, under this initiative at home. 12 maximum plants per household. So the fact that a cop has probable cause that you're growing marijuana is not going to be enough for a search warrant. He needs something more, like maybe he has an informant who says they've got 20 plants in there, or more than 12. Or maybe we've got evidence that this person is selling marijuana. But there's got to be some illegal activity connected to the grow in order for police to get a warrant. So this is going to make a huge difference in terms of people being worried about being raided and stuff like that.
I would argue that another reason that Prop 207 is going to help people is that the 1 ounce that you get isn't like a 2-week allotment like there is in the medical marijuana program. And I believe there's plenty of patients out there that end up hitting their allotment all the time when they have to budget how much cannabis they consume because they can only buy or possess 2.5 ounces within a 2-week period. But with the Smart and Safe initiative, you can buy an ounce, consume it, and a couple days later, you can go buy another ounce, and you can end up with far more than 2.5 ounces
that same day
in 2 weeks.
I mean, Dave,
Well,
you ate an ounce of dried marijuana flower.
I ate an ounce of dried marijuana, and in one sitting.
Yeah.
And so I think it's possible that people can go through an ounce per day. But I don't know if dispensaries are going to end up doing this. It might end up being weird. But what if a dispensary decided to sell fresh marijuana, and that you're not going to get high because there's no active THC in there whatsoever? It's only THCA, and you juice it for some reason. You're going to probably end up with a smaller amount because wet marijuana is going to end up being a smaller amount than dry marijuana. But you'd be able to go through an ounce of wet marijuana every single day if they ended up selling wet marijuana. But that would only be marketed to people who want to juice it, and I'm not sure exactly what an ounce of wet marijuana would look like.
But
it
that
might
would
just
be perfectly legal for them to do.
It would. So there'd be ways for a patient to get access to a lot more marijuana than they have under the medical marijuana program.
Can I just make a caveat on that, because I don't want to give people in trouble here.
What's the caveat, Tom?
Well, you get that ounce of marijuana and you juice it, there's going to be the residual, and that's still going to be considered marijuana, even though you've juiced, a lot of the cannabinoids out of it.
It's like what's left over.
So you don't want to have some, marijuana that's been juiced sitting here, because that's going to be counted. So you got to get rid of that before you get the new ounce. You can't be in possession of a juiced amount of marijuana and then new marijuana, an ounce of juiced marijuana and an ounce of fresh marijuana, because that's going to take you over your ounce. So if you are juicing it, make sure that you first get rid of, dispose of the leftover marijuana that you juiced before you go and get another ounce. Just want to make sure that we're not misleading anybody there.
Well, there we go. Alex, Tom, can you think of any other ways that Prop 207 is going to help people and how it's going to help people?
Well, I think it's going to help people relax.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's one of the things that is. I found that it has that effect on me. Obviously, relaxation is not a qualifying condition under the AMA. I think anxiety maybe should be, but hopefully the point will be moot coming up in November because this will pass. But I really do think that, especially from the perspective of getting through the pandemic, at least for me, I mean, not to get into any kind of politics here, but after I watched the debate, the other night, I just could think to myself one thing, and the thing I thought is, man, I'm glad I have a medical marijuana card.
Yeah, because that debate was a soup sandwich, if you ask me.
It was a lot of high anxiety, and I thought, I'll bet, you can either, I guess, to relax, the typical things are, have a cocktail, do yoga, but it definitely does have properties. And by the way, I'm kind of taken by the fact that the bees land on it. I mean, the fact that really the plant itself, it's kind of been given a very bad name and reputation on purpose.
Right, by propaganda.
Yeah, and but when you really stop and look at it, that it does benefit a lot of people. So a lot of people who have used it, I think it's a different experience. Like if you were to compare the effect that marijuana has versus alcohol, I think, and I still use marijuana because I'm a Gen Xer. I know cannabis is the way to go, and some people give you a hard time about using marijuana, but mi madre's lengua primera es español, so I think marijuana is a beautiful word from a beautiful language, and I think we should keep using it because it's ours now. But I think a lot of people would experience a lot of benefit to being able to relax more, and particularly if there's ever a moment in American history that I've lived through, I'd say this is the most high tension, high stress time that we have, and I think that it would be useful.
And speaking of alcohol, which obviously overconsumption of alcohol or long term can lead to health problems for people, and other problems, lack of judgment, like in driving or in domestic situations. We know that there's, connections to, for at least for some people that overuse alcohol. People, I think studies have shown, as well as anecdotal evidence that people can draw on, people who are marijuana consumers tend to drink less. And that's true also for opioids. People who are on prescription opioids tend to use less of their opioids when they combine it with marijuana, because they both work in slightly different ways to mitigate pain. So I think one of the wonderful things about marijuana is that it just causes people to naturally cut back on maybe other substances that aren't good for them.
Except ice cream.
Well,
Right, that might tip you in the other direction.
Yeah, well,
right.
yeah. I mean, that's a slightly different question. But of course, if you're suffering from a wasting disorder, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
But as far as in terms of chemical substances, whether it's alcohol or opioids, I know that the evidence is that marijuana use causes people to use less of those more dangerous substances.
And by the way, and this information's been around for a while. I remember in a study from 2015 where they just took, I can't remember which group did it, but it was a think tank out east or a university, and they just basically did a study of Medicare reimbursements for states that allow the medical use of marijuana, and also states that allow adult use of marijuana. And what they found was that there was about an 11% decrease in Medicare reimbursement. So these are just economists talking. This is not like a doctor, one doctor says this, another doctor says that. The big takeaway is that when adults are given the right to choose between using cannabis and using something else for a variety of ailments, they make that choice, and we know that because Medicare reimbursements fell by, I think they said about 11%.
Well,
And that's a big part of the resistance that we get from them. I think that marijuana policy reform has gotten over the decades from medicine, from pharmaceuticals.
We've got 1 minute left. Sorry to interrupt, but do you guys have anything to say to conclude this broadcast day?
Well, like I'll just say, as I've said before, that this is so important. Prop 207, a yes vote. This is a definite big step forward. We're going to build on this in the future, but we need this. We need this first down, as I like to call it, as we move down the field to eventually achieve even a better marijuana policy reform in the future. This is a great initiative. It's definitely a big yes vote. Please get out and vote. Even if you weren't planning on voting for any other reason, go out and vote yes on 207.
All right, Alex, you got 20 seconds.
Vote yes on 207, because otherwise the bees
Think
are
about
going to
the
come
bees.
find you and maybe sting you. No, really. So this is, let's stop arresting grown-ups for reasonable grown-up choices and vote yes on 207. It can be built on later, but it will allow a lot of people to relax and a lot of people to gain a lot of benefit. And that's it.
All right, until next time, this was Safer Arizona Wire. Thank you.
Thank you.